Yes, we're
Okay,
live.
okay. Live from 23 Liberty Street. It's Saturday night.
Hey!
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming over. I'm Amy Doyle. This is my husband, Bibi Gonzalez, and my kids will be popping in eventually to share in tonight's festivities. I'm going to start tonight by reading an essay that I wrote this week about a dear friend and inspired mostly by the things that I imagine my students going through during this coronavirus quarantine. So here we go. I hope you can hear me. I think about my students all the time during this period of isolation. I don't worry about them missing the big calendar events. What I do worry about is the separation from a best friend in whose company life feels survivable and even comical. My friendship with my lifelong best friend, Colleen, was never about the big stuff, even though we documented every single event, big or small, in a journal we shared. Our friendship wasn't captured in the parties or concerts or trips or proms, the things we believe supply the content for memories, but rather in the spontaneous exploits that happen unplanned as laughter when girls are together. If this quarantine were happening when I was young and I wasn't allowed to be with my best friend who lived two doors down, to watch Brady Bunch 3 times in a row when we were in elementary school, or dump my homework on the spare bed in her room to actually do it when I was in junior high, or maybe not do it in high school, and play the Beatles or Joni Mitchell or Simon and Garfunkel so much we'd need to put a penny on the stylus to avoid the skips. I would have suffered intense deprivation of the spirit. As it was, I barely was able to handle the Welch's stay-at-home order during the holidays. Christmas was sacred family time in their house, both the eve and the day, which felt excessive as well as punishing. I took no comfort in anticipating the new games and Barbies Colleen would get that would be shared with me eventually. I would have gladly foregone the dream house and superfection just to get back to the business of playing house in General Hospital. I was downright resentful that because I wasn't technically family, I wasn't allowed over. Colleen could have come to my house on Christmas. Us Doyles had loose traditions. Christmas Eve, my mother would cook that classic Irish holiday meal, chili made with Campbell's tomato soup and a lead finger pinch of cinnamon. My mother loved Christmas time, but by the 24th, what with having to corral her wayward children to church and needing to unwrap the many unlabeled gifts she'd gotten for them, she was spent. We'd all just as soon eat bowls of chili from our laps than crowd around a dining room table that was a little wobbly due to a slight slope in the floor. I did love Christmas at my house, even the chili, but the 48 hours isolation from Colleen's was unbearable. I consumed at least half of my recommended daily allowance of calories from Colleen's kitchen, even when snacks weren't offered, because Colleen was never as hungry as I was. I would secretly help myself to them by keep creeping through the kitchen and, quiet as a cat, reach up to the forbidden hostess cupboard and slide out 2 elegantly foiled ho-hos, which I would deep throat in the bathroom. The beautiful snacks, Kool-Aid in a Mr. Kool-Aid pitcher, Pringles, were proof to me that Colleen's mother really had it together. She did these epic shopping trips once a week that would require half of the neighborhood kids already in her backyard playing kickball to help carry the bags from the trunk of the station wagon to the kitchen table. Mrs. Welch was resignedly generous with us Holly Street strays who needed her yard, her snacks, her toilet, and she bore this cross with little more spite than a long, gusty sigh. In those days, there was no village raising a child, but rather one woman raising the entire village. There were times when Mrs. Welch would ban both Colleen and me from the house with the dreaded mandate to play outside. I hated to play outside. Kickball was humiliating, jailbreak downright terrifying, and the shock of playing in the snow was only tolerable because of the promise of cocoa afterwards. Mrs. Welch felt especially entitled to throw us out during the summer. One summer, as boredom rose with the temperature and tensions among the neighborhood kids became so acute once Patrick O'Hara retreated from his declaration that he alone among us had been saved by Jesus, a provocation so daring and delicious that we tried to crucify him for a few hours. But then he changed his mind, saying he was just as bad as the rest of us. So the street was once again left to find the next victim, which often enough was me. A new distraction deferred this inevitable torment in the form of a new mom who moved into the house in between Colleen's and mine. She chain smoked, so was always out on her porch, and didn't seem to mind our company. So we'd bring the Yahtzee, drink Pepsi, and help by making sure her toddler didn't fall off the steps. The continuous play of Fleetwood Mac's Rumors pouring out of my sister's bedroom window next door made it feel like a party. But stabbing through the wafts of patchouli-scented reefer that wrapped around Stevie Nicks' dreams was this nice new neighbor's stinking dog, a sullen Doberman pinscher whose ears had been taped to make her look formidable. Colleen's mother recognized the breed as trouble and complained that she didn't like the idea of us being around a dog who could at any moment snap. When we told Becky this, she smiled conspiratorially, took a long drag from her Pall Mall, and said without exhaling, "Y'all don't need to worry about Holly." And as the smoke trickled out of her nose, she explained that there was a secret code word that would make Holly go apeshit, but unless she was commanded thus, the dog would just lay around and stink. Well, this information was too tantalizing. "What's the secret code?" we probably blurted at the same time. Becky paused, lit a new cigarette with the old one, and considered the now sleeping dog. "Holly," she hissed, as if it were one syllable. When the dog ignored her, she turned to us, and in a voice so low it created triple chins, said, "Dane. The code is Dane." We couldn't believe she'd given two bored little kids this live grenade, and it wasn't long until we discovered, much to our disappointment, that Holly would not go berserk, no matter how many different ways we commanded "Dane" when Becky went into the house to refill her soda. Thanksgiving inflicted more of the God-forsaken family time that barred me from the Welches. I was stuck home where things were definitely not run as efficiently as they were at Colleen's. Except for the chili, my mother hated to cook. She was on to cooking and saw it for the time-sucking exercise and futility that it was, especially when one had as many mouths to feed as she had. One Thanksgiving, her clamorous song of resentment that she played on the various kitchen instruments was suddenly interrupted by an accusatory shriek to my father, who sat a mere 15 feet away in the living room, quietly painting. His eyes pulled away from the winter landscape painted by Bob Ross on TV, only long enough to dab a little cadmium yellow surprise to his gray clouds. "Bob!" my mother shrilled, not to the painter on TV, but to her husband. "The oven door fell off!" The serenity of both Bobs was dangerous. "Well," my father said dreamily, his eyes unmoved from the jagged chunk of sheetrock he was using for his canvas, "pick it up." Over at Colleen's, her mother wasn't any more cheerful, plagued like my mother was with a bunch of kids who never helped. But Colleen's mom wore an apron, followed recipes that she would return to an index card file, and had good dishes that lived in a locked china closet. She kindly tolerated me. She never said, "You again?" when I appeared before the frost had burned off the grass, nor did she call me the thing that wouldn't leave. But Colleen and I both knew not to push it with sleepovers. Without ever discussing it, we knew she'd say, "You live right next door." She's here all day. Why do you need to have a sleepover? She wouldn't say that I'd also eaten both lunch and dinner over there. So for years, after a full day of playing Charlie's Angels or making up dances or doing hair before I'd overstayed my welcome, Colleen would walk me out at 10 o'clock and watch me run for my life home from her front steps, which were exactly one house and one driveway away from mine. But once we were teenagers, there was still so much to talk about at 10 o'clock, so many deep song lyrics to write down in our journal. And we'd only listened to Ladies of the Canyon 19 times that day. We couldn't possibly separate. We didn't want to risk that Mrs. Welch would say no, so we sneaked. We'd make a big show to no audience of my going home. A yawn, loud plans about watching the Simon and Garfunkel concert in Central Park again tomorrow, and then a well-executed slam of the door at the same moment that I crept back upstairs. We'd performed this racket dozens of times before we were finally busted. We must have been laughing too hard. To our horror, we heard the door open that separated the downstairs from the upstairs, a suite of 2 bedrooms that had its own phone line and where Colleen's parents never ventured. "Who's up?" Mrs. Welch hissed. We froze, and Colleen tried to stop laughing long enough to answer. And then, for the first time in years, Mrs. Welch started making her way up the stairs. This was a dangerous undertaking, even for those of us who could take a tumble without breaking a hip. The stairs looked more like a hill, each individual step indiscernible due to mounds of girl laundry, clean but absolutely everywhere, plus shoes, hairbrushes, somewhere the phone. I scurried into the closet, whose sliding doors scraped a little of the Clearasil I'd put on my nose. Colleen was now laughing wildly, like a hyena, my mom would have said. I could see her through the crack between the doors, holding her arms out to prevent her mother, a bomb of explosive self-sacrifice, from detonating. Was it too much to ask that she get a decent goddamn night of sleep? Teenage girl laughter, especially when accompanied by snorting and limp-limbed body collapsing, really irked mothers, which usually just fanned the flames of hilarity further. Colleen was no actress, and when laughter took possession of her, there was no collecting herself. Once, in that same room, I asked her to call a lady who owed me money for some yard work I'd done to see if she could pay me. Colleen said, "Sure, I'll do it," and we wrote up a script of what to say and then dialed the number. Naturally, we had to hang up twice when the lady answered, but eventually Colleen pulled it together to say the speech, or at least part of it. She said, "Hi, Mrs. Foley, this is Amy Doyle." But before she could get out the message about the money, she burst into desperate laughter and hung up the phone. She was just as hysterical now, so her mom stepped over her and went right to the closet. And there I was, up to my teeth in the flannel of the high-necked nightgown I now kept at Colleen's for my weekly sleepovers. "What in the world are you doing in the closet? It is too late for all this nonsense," she said. A weary sigh told me that I could stay. Despite this boundary having been crossed, the holidays always remained off limits. And so December 23rd has been my and Colleen's Christmas celebration all these years. This past year, Colleen's gift was a time capsule from high school. The lipstick I wore, a miniature journal like the one we used to write song lyrics and poems in, Simon and Garfunkel's concert in Central Park, sandalwood incense. In my candlelit living room, 2 blocks away from Holly Street, we burned the incense and discovered that Revlon rum raisin was just as good as Lancome's matte cognac. And we decided to take a walk in the thickly falling snow. We booted up and latched arms and walked in the road like the posse of unleashed dogs, including Dusty Doyle, that used to stalk the neighborhood. Molly Welch, a much more civilized dog and kind of a wimp if you ask Dusty, would never truck around with those thugs. The snow that fell, it was the same snow that fell 35 years earlier, that was packed into weapons that the neighborhood boys could pelt with impunity. that filled Colleen's yard, beckoning us to run out in our socks, that landed on the giant evergreen in Zettner's yard, a tree that made the whole street look, in December anyway, as pretty as any other street in town. The same snow that I'd watch fall in the dreamy glow of a street light from Colleen's bedroom, where the silence asked nothing of me. We arrived at my old house first, which had been empty for less time than Colleen's, but seemed more abandoned. This house would just sink until finally the city would condemn it. Yet the front bushes looked cheerful, fluffy with cottony snow. A selfie would not do justice to the house, so Kyle had me pose, and with both of my feet on the unshoveled walk, I was able to reach the wrought iron porch railing with my elbow. I'd always hated how close the house was to the sidewalk, as if it had been flung there by a tornado after flying around in the sky for a bit. It felt a little sacrilegious, as if I were posing in a cemetery, but the house didn't seem to mind, and in fact straightened itself up a little bit, like the giving tree does at the end of the book. Then we slid down to Colleen's house, where she mugged for the camera like Carol Burnett doing Norma Desmond. I couldn't get her to take a serious picture. A serious picture with this house that had witnessed our lives would open up both of our mended hearts. One Christmas, we told Mrs. Welch that we wanted to put lights on the front porch. She laughed out loud at the idea, saying it would be like drawing attention to a wart. But this house was everything to us. We turned to leave without mooning over the window of the bedroom that would probably surprise us with its tiny size when it had so amply accommodated us, our big shames and bigger hopes, but with no room for the giant elephants from both of our families. On our way back, we passed the spot where our friend Stacy fell and knocked out a permanent front tooth, and the house whose backyard we called the woods and where we drank warm PBRs in 5th grade. And we made our way to the slight incline of Holly Street that had felt like Kilimanjaro on our banana bikes, and finally to the now vacant lot that used to be the Pink House, a disgrace, but also a comfort because the rest of us always had that house and that family that was in worse shape than our own. Right now, I am wearing my Revlon rum raisin, and sandalwood incense burns in my house, a little strongly, I might add. And my friend, whom I haven't seen in over a month, is watching. Hi, Colleen. Who knew how lucky we were? That's very nice timing. This is the very sentimental part. I'm going to start that line. I'm going to start the whole thing over, okay, guys? Who knew how lucky we were, even in Auburn, before APT existed, when there was nothing to do? Who knew then how lucky we were to just be together? And that is the end of my piece. I would like to introduce my daughter, Nina, who is going to play a song.
Give people a chance to take it in now. Give people a chance to take it in and enjoy it. It's been my privilege and honor and blessing to usually have first access to all these wonderful stories. I do not know why she stays with me with all the talent she's got, but that's okay.
We're good and great.
Hey, easy.
I'd like to introduce our daughter, Nina.
Hold on, before we introduce our daughter.
Oh, yeah.
One of your adoring fans out there would like to ask a question.
Oh,
okay. Let's see. Where's it at? Hi, Amy. We did get a question. Ready?
I'm ready, yes.
It is, when did you start writing and what inspired you to write at the time? Who edits your work? Love, your adoring niece in Alaska, Mariah.
Oh, hi, Mariah. Oh, my God. I can't believe you're there. Actually, Mariah, Grandma, she had everything to do with it. The way that my mother was a writer of letters and diaries, and she actually wrote a memoir that was really, really funny, and there's actually a scene in it that reminds me of me and Colleen, and it's a scene between her and her best friend, and they are in Holy Family School, and I think they're in high school because they were taking chemistry with the formidable Father Davy, who is no nonsense. Okay, like there's nobody around today like Mr. Father Davy, not even Allison Fennessy. Okay, he was no nonsense. And my mother and her best friend, who is a forever friend, just like Colleen, were sitting there and they just were giggling and giggling and they kept getting in trouble. And finally, they came up with a plan to avoid it. And my mother's friend said, if we get the urge to laugh, this is what you do. Just think, my cat died. And my mother said, okay. And so, naturally, it didn't take long before an event happened that required this response. And they start giggling and they can feel it erupting. And Mac looks at my mother and goes, and of course, they just totally fell out. So my mother was a natural writer. But also, interestingly, Auburn Public Theater has everything to do with me writing. One of the first things that I ever wrote was kind of a love letter to Auburn Public Theater, because Angela, this was back in the day when I was not working, I was home with my children, and Angela would see me, strolling the babies up steep hills and pull over and say, I'm sending you 2 tickets to the yoga concert or to the comedy act or whatever. And I didn't have any money, so I wanted to do something to thank her. So one of the first things that I ever wrote was about Auburn Public Theater. And my editor, as soon as I feel like something is still rough but a little decent, I will read it to my husband, who always prefers the first draft. And when I show him the polished draft, he usually has completely lost interest in it. So I would like to introduce my daughter, who is going to, who takes guitar lessons from my brother, Mark Doyle. And she is going to play In My Life in honor of, all the memories that all of us have that are getting us through this time. Okay, so Nina Gonzalez, come on in. Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Again, no talent that comes out of this family runs through me. This is all Amy's ambition and all her hard work. Anyway, as we wait for my son to come down and play us a song or two. Rebecca, I'm not ready for you yet. Just a couple of questions, a couple of fillers that I like to make. As Amy said, I'm Bibi. I'm her husband. I teach at the high school, in case you're not familiar with me. Anyway, so people have asked. But first of all, I want to make sure that you understand these fillers are just about a non-COVID, non-teaching level, okay? We can spend lots of time talking about that, I'm sure, and I hope that those of us who are blessed enough to have held on to our jobs continue to remember that there are people who have not and do what we can to support them. But I don't want to spend this time doing that. Want to answer a couple of questions that we have heard. Somebody says, so what is the most satisfying thing that you've been able to do? Well, eating old freezer leftover and unwanted food, because nobody will help dad eat the leftovers. So everybody gets fresh food every day. Dad's got to eat the leftover. And then if you have a daughter like mine who experiments with vegetarianism, then you got to eat all this vegan sausage. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Lie. If your child asks for vegan sausage, you give them some Gianelli and you lie. Okay? Another thing I enjoyed was 6 hours painting my daughter's room without stressing about what else I should have been doing. Mind you, her birthday has happened during this time, and because of my wife, she was able to have a pretty rich day, and it didn't look like she was too sad about it. And it was so great to be able to paint her room without wondering and thinking about what else I should have been doing. Anyway, what else? So what have I realized from this experience so far? Well, first of all, I guess this is a little COVID. We're obviously spitting on each other all of the time. And how easily this germ spread. Maybe we could work on that, okay? Perhaps these masks are here to stay. All right? Let's see. And I don't like waking up with an alarm clock. Without an alarm clock. I thought I would, but watch what you wish for. Because even though we go to sleep early every night here and wake up early, crack of dawn, there's just something about waking up and not knowing if you've had enough sleep that drives you crazy. So anyway, think about that in case you're going through. Now, what else did I want to bring? No. I got one more thing I want to mention here. All right. This is a friendly public service announcement that I need to make. All right. And this is about those of us who may be a little bit, you probably already passed this concern in your life, but those of us who are worried about how much time our children would be spending online, okay? Let me tell you what we have done, okay? And again, this works for us. It may not work for you. I get it. You may have your own reasons why you do what you do. No problem. All right, so here's what we do. First of all, so how to curb your children's screen time, okay? Go to your basement and plug the internet into a timer. Yes, just about everybody's cable company today works on a plug in the basement. Find it, put a timer on it, okay? Because when we get into bed at 10, the internet goes to bed too. I hear my kids at that time stumbling out of their rooms into the hall as they leave their screens for the first time that evening. Good, it's over, okay? Well, what about the internet through their phones, you ask? Well, those of you who have put data on your children's phones, that's a problem now, isn't it? So you're going to have to collect those phones. But in my house, my kids don't have data on their phones, okay? Why would I put data on their phones, okay? So they got internet on the road? That makes no sense to me. I pay for their minutes and for their text so I can get in touch with them. Dirt cheap, all right? So think about that. Moreover, why would I buy them data, right? They don't need it. So if they want data for their phones, they have to buy it. $10 a day. And they make money. but they're not really interested in buying that data. So when the Wi-Fi goes off, the internet goes off. And unfortunately for them, the internet's also connected to our cable service. So there is no TV in here, okay, after 10 o'clock. And I'm almost done here. Hang in there. To help them stay offline or be productive during the day, we have two other rules. Number one, schoolwork must be done between Monday and Friday before 3 p.m. That's right. So like the school day, that's when they're expected to do their schoolwork. They are not allowed to do schoolwork on the weekends or in the evenings. No, I want them to have a sense of routine. All right. So they have to do their work before 3 o'clock. No work on the evenings or the weekend. And let's see. We also turn off the internet daily from 3 to 7, during which time we try to do something as a family. We might take a walk, play a game, work on a puzzle. Every day we try to do at least one of these things to help them occupy that time. Anyway, I hope some of that was useful or at least entertaining. But again, I get it. You got your own reasons why you do what you do, and I support you. Okay? All right. Without further ado, let's get my son, Miguel Gonzalez, on this piano. Thank you very much.
Hold on, I want to say something. Miguel was going to play a song that was one of the classic songs in my father's repertoire when he was alive and playing the piano. I wrote an essay about trying to get Miguel to carry this torch of piano playing. And so it's a special song that his Uncle Mark taught him that actually my brother Mark, and my father's jazz band, Jazz Minds, performed live. So this is Autumn Leaves.
No.
Go ahead. notice the jazz listeners that we have up there. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. This was really fun, and I recommend to anybody that you should do it because it feels really good to feel like maybe you're in touch. I know that my niece is at least watching, so thank you so much, and let's continue to support Auburn Public Theater through time, and God bless. Good night.
Good night.